Good afternoon. Welcome to CCMA's webinar on Back to Basics, Saying No to Overprogramming with Lisa Lytwyn. And Lisa Lytwyn is the coordinator of campus ministry for Catholic Terps at the University of Maryland. She developed a passion for campus ministry as an undergraduate at Rutgers University and working as a student leader with the Brotherhood of Hope. And after college, she served as a missionary with St. Paul's Outreach at Seton Hall University. This is her 7th year with Catholic Terps. She received her master's in theology from St. Joseph's College up here in New England in Maine, and she lives in Bethesda, Maryland with her husband, Matt. So Lisa, welcome, and I'll now turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Deacon Frank, and thanks to Mike St. Pierre for inviting me to speak today. I hope to meet many of you at the CCMA conference in May. I will be there. I'm already signed up, so I hope many of you will join us. So I'd like to start off today with just 2 questions. Well, maybe 3 actually. Think back to the fall. How did your staff and student leaders feel at the end of your fall outreach or your welcome weeks? Were you exhausted? Did you want to climb into a cave, not want to host another event for a long time? Or have you ever been at a staff meeting and as you review the calendar, someone says, well, we did it again. We're just doing way too much. I know our Catholic Terps team has definitely been in both of those situations, but this year we did something different, and that's what I'm going to share with you today in the hopes that it can be helpful to you and your ministries. So I just want to share a little bit about Catholic Terps before I get started. So we are at the University of Maryland in College Park. We're part of the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. UMD has a little over 2,800 undergrads, so it's a pretty big school. On the left there, you can see a picture of our center, and we have 600 to 800 students each week that come through our doors for the various things that we offer. On the right there is a fun picture of our team. We are led by Father Rob Walsh, who's our chaplain, 2 campus ministers, myself and Matt O'Hara. We have a development director, Ann Gradowski, facilities manager, Paulina Lobos, and then we have a focused missionary team with 5 people on it, led by Ashlyn Dunn. We have a lot of fun together. We've really invested a lot of time in building relationships with each other, and part of what I'm going to share about was able to happen because of the trust we have with our staff. And then on the bottom there, you can see our kids. They're the ones that it's really all about. We have 42 student leaders who help run everything at the Catholic Student Center, from liturgy to retreats to Bible studies to service, stewardship, maintenance, Wednesday dinner. I mean, they really do it all. That's a picture from our fall retreat. So we're really blessed to have a very active student center with a lot of participation from the kids on campus. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about where we were, which was seriously overprogrammed. This is a screenshot of our calendar from September 2012. And as you can see, we had something going on almost every night of the week. And that 3rd week, which was our Bible study kickoff week, there's kind of a purple line throughout the week there. There was so much going on, Google couldn't even tell me everything. So when I went back and found this, just looking at this now even makes me a little anxious, just because these were crazy times back then. And I think it's easy to get caught in an events pattern in campus ministry, and that's kind of where we were for a couple years. But I'm happy to say we moved past it. So that's a little bit about what I'm going to share today. We have this wonderful tradition called Cup Outreach on our campus. We hand out 2,000 to 3,000 cups with our Wednesday night dinner info and our Sunday Mass time info to freshmen as they move in on campus. And it's a very, very effective way to get our name out on campus. We have 40 kids that come out with us, and we're just everywhere giving cups to everyone. But where the overprogramming hurt us a couple years ago was we'd be meeting kids, giving them a cup, but then inviting them to what felt like 18 different events. I remember having conversations where I would meet the freshmen, give them the cup, and then invite them to volleyball that night, and then the tailgate the next morning, and then Sunday Mass, and then our kickoff barbecue, and then a service event. And it was just overwhelming for the new people, I think, and it was overwhelming for our staff because every single ministry was hosting an event. We even had our focus missionaries hosting events, and it was very overprogrammed. So contrast that craziness with this quote from Pope Francis. Pope Francis is calling for a shared commitment to a pastoral plan that brings us back to the essential, which is solidly focused on Jesus Christ. To get diverted by many secondary or superfluous things does not help. What helps is to focus on the fundamental reality, which is the encounter with Christ. So how easy is it for us as campus ministries to get caught up in the secondary and the superfluous, to get away from the most important things, to start saying yes to every new idea or every group that wants to collaborate with you on campus, and then to lose the focus of the encounter with Christ? I think another way to ask this question is, what do you offer in your campus ministry that brings the most students to encounter Christ? I think Catholic Terps has been on a 2-year journey to kind of hone in on this question. And we started with trimming down our Sunday Mass schedule, which I'll share about in a little bit, and kind of culminated this fall with inviting students to our top 4 events that focused on this encounter with Christ question. So I'm going to share a little bit about this journey we went through in the hopes that it can help you and your ministries. So when we ask that question, what does Catholic Terps offer that brings the most students to encounter Christ? We came up with 4 answers. The first one is the sacraments. Obviously, at all of our Catholic centers or all of our campus ministries, the only place where students can receive Jesus in the Eucharist and in confession is through our Catholic student centers. So our program has always been centered on the Eucharist, and we all credit any fruit that happens in our ministry to that. And we regularly see and hear from students that starting a habit of daily Mass or going to weekly Eucharistic adoration or their encounter with Christ in adoration on our retreats is kind of the game changer for them. So that made it into our top 4. The next thing we realized was small groups, which on our campus run as Bible studies that our focus missionaries lead and oversee, is the next thing that really leads students to that encounter with Christ. And we realized that it's actually more transformative for students to make that weekly commitment to their small group than to go to a bunch of one-off campus ministry events. We see that students grow in their relationship with God, they learn about the faith, they grow in community with each other, they learn how to be missionary disciples through those small groups. So again, that made it onto our top 4 list. And then the next thing is our weekly event, which on our campus is a Wednesday night, 5:30 Mass and 6 o'clock free dinner. This is not, the dinner part is not the deepest encounter with Christ, of all the things on this list. However, it's a really important first step. Everybody needs to eat. Everybody gets sick of the dining hall food. And so a lot of new faces come every week to check out our Wednesday night dinner. And that can be a great place to just meet people right where they're at and then maybe invite them into some of these other things that can help deepen their encounter with Christ. And then the last thing is our retreats. A lot of times we hear from students that their first experience of really knowing that God loves them personally, or their first time even just having an experience of God or of Christ, is on the retreat. A lot of conversions come out of that. It builds up the community. And there's just a lot of fruit from it. So these were our top 4 answers to that question. What do we do that brings the most students to encounter Christ? And I think we always knew these 4 things were really important parts of our program. However, when we were in over-programmed mode, we weren't able to really focus or highlight these things because so much else was going on. So our team director, our focus team director, Ashlyn, had an idea this past summer. She came to us and said, what if we focus on these top 4 things for the first 6 weeks of school? What if we get students out to these most transformative things, keep everybody kind of focused on that, and then after our retreat, which was 6 weeks into the semester, we'll add back in some of the other great things that we do. And so we said, yes, let's do it. Let's give it a try. That sounds awesome. So we went from come to 18 things, back in 2012 to come to 4. And it was just a much clearer message, and it let the small groups get established. It let Sunday Mass and Wednesday night dinner become a routine for the new students. Retreat filled up really well. We did maybe 2 or 3 additional events in those first few weeks of school. It wasn't like we did literally nothing besides these 4 things, but we really kept the focus and the emphasis on these 4. And then after retreat, as I said, we added in some of our other programming. And so this was really fruitful. I mean, it was kind of a risk. Actually, it was a risk, but here's some of the fruit of what happened. Our staff and student leaders were more available to build relationships with the new students because less time was going into running events and being event planners. We saw an increase in our small group attendance, an increase on our retreats. And then this was the really cool thing for myself and Matt for the campus ministry side, was kind of deferring to the small group side actually wound up growing the other parts of our program. So we saw more kids out at our men's and women's nights, our monthly Pack the Chapel, our different service projects in that later half of the semester than we had previously seen when we were doing all of that stuff in the first few weeks of school. So basically there was growth all around because of this approach, and we loved it so much that we repeated it for the spring semester. And I'd like to say we're just never going to go back to the craziness because this really was very fruitful for us. So I think that I, and probably you can relate to this, I can pressure myself into thinking that as a campus minister, we need to cover all the Catholic doctrine, and we need to have a service project that taps into every piece of Catholic social teaching. And not only do we need to provide spiritually, but socially and psychologically. And I think that pressure is what maybe wound us in a place where we were overprogrammed. And this back to basics approach, this approach that focuses on what do you do that brings about that encounter with Christ for the most students, can help us as campus ministries zero in on our top 4 or 5 things and do those things excellently. And then just see the fruit of that, hopefully some of this fruit that I've listed here. Okay, so how can you on your campus make this switch? I think I mentioned this was a multi-year process for us, but I'd like to go through each one of these 4 things and just share about how we tweaked them to be able to offer these things like more excellently than we were doing before. But before I go into each one of these, I just want to say that I think it's critical to approach this process with prayer on your individual campuses, with your staff, with your student leaders. There's a book I'm going to talk about later called Living as Missionary Disciples. And that book says planning for ministry must be permeated with prayer. And so I just want to encourage everyone in that. Don't take this as an exact model, but pray about it in the light of your campus and let the Holy Spirit lead you where he wants you to go. He definitely led us to a good place through this. So our number 1 there, prayerfully evaluate the schedule and resources for the sacraments on your campus. So some of the things we looked at, this was 2 years ago, considering if the number of masses and the locations were really serving the students, considering if certain mass times had decreased attendance and maybe if other ones have an increase, considering if your liturgical ministries are stretched thin, are your students, do they have enough manpower to cover, your full schedule, considering if maybe you should combine some of your masses. Maybe you're in a place where you need to add a Mass, which is a great problem to have. How can you do this strategically for both the students and the priests on your campus? So when we considered some of those questions, we decided 2 years ago to move from 5 Sunday Masses to 3, which sounds kind of weird, right? We were a little like, oh, how are we going to write this to the cardinal? We're offering less Masses. It sounds bad. But actually, the reason we did it was because our community was so divided between those 5 Masses, and no one of those locations or Mass times was at capacity. That when we made the switch, we wound up having a larger community at each Mass, and that just gave a greater sense of community. It also enabled us to focus on how can we welcome people better. So this is an example of, quality over quantity. With less Masses, we were able to add a greeter ministry. We started doing Mass sheets that help people follow along with the Mass. We developed our own Mass guide and music supplement. The first year we did this, the new Mass was the 8 p.m. Mass. We actually got a food truck to come out for that first Sunday. It was probably the most fun event in however many, 9 years of campus ministry, the most fun event I've ever done. But we also added hospitality events throughout the year at different of the Masses. So again, this is what worked for us. Different things might work for different campuses, but the bottom line is, how can we do Mass excellently? And these are some of the things that have worked for us. Okay, the next thing is to consider prayerfully evaluate how you do small groups on your campus. So consider doing your small group kickoff during your weekly event. This was an idea Ashlyn had this year. Typically we had either done, it was its own event or it was after our weekly Wednesday night dinner, but this year we actually did it during the dinner, and we had a lot more people join Bible studies by just capitalizing on the fact that there were already 150 people in the building. We also gave the small groups a few weeks to get started. So like I said, I think it was about 6 weeks from the kickoff through our fall retreat where we really cleared the calendar and allowed the Bible studies to get started, which meant that next bullet point there, not setting up conflicting events for those weeks. And then we got our student leaders who didn't lead Bible studies to be on board with this plan, to be on board with promoting small groups. And so the fruit of this was we had 70 new people join in the fall, and that was the largest amount of new people joining small groups that we had had. And that number just continued to grow throughout the year. And Ashlyn just told me last week that she actually had more students ask to start Bible studies mid-year or beginning of this spring semester, and she credits that to just giving space to let the Bible studies meet regularly and start to make those connections and build that community that inspired students in those studies to say, I want to be able to offer this to another student. So these are some things that you can consider on your campus. You might not have Bible studies, maybe you have men's and women's groups, or maybe your small groups are based around various ministries, but I think these general questions can help any campus think about how can we do our small group kickoff better, how can we highlight it and really get more students engaged there. Okay, so the next thing we looked at was prayerfully evaluating our weekly event. And this is another thing that might be different on every campus. Your weekly event might be speaker-based or praise and worship-based, or maybe it's service-based or a men's and women's type thing. Ours is Mass and food every Wednesday. And so we thought through, how can we make this Wednesday night dinner more engaging? How can we really take advantage of the fact that people are here every week? So our students spent a lot of time thinking through that, and they came up with different games they were going to play, just be inviting people to join volleyball or join Foursquare or play outdoor Jenga, just to help people connect, not just eat and leave, but actually build some relationships. And then, as I said, that became kind of like a springboard to inviting people to some of the other things going on in our ministry. So whatever your weekly thing is, you can pray and think about, how can this be even better? How can this be more attractive to students? How can it build the community in a deeper way? Okay, then the last thing we looked at was evaluating our retreats. I'm thinking that for most of our campuses, we hear a lot of great feedback from the retreats that we run, that it's a really transformative thing for students. We are going through our student leader applications right now with Catholic Terps, and my coworker Matt and I have been reading from almost every student that Mass and Eucharistic adoration on our retreats were key moments of conversion for them. So if this is the most transformative thing that we do and it leads to a very deep encounter with Christ, the question becomes, how can we get more people out for retreats? So some things that we've focused on: personal invites. How do you mobilize not just the retreat team, but also all the student leaders, even some of the regulars that maybe aren't in leadership, but like they're good personalities to be inviting people? How can you mobilize all of those people to be doing that personal invitation? How can our promotion be excellent? You know, our students make these ridiculous promotional videos, but people love them. And it actually is a great way to just show, hey, these are fun people leading the retreat. You know, in our imaging, in our online promotions, how can all of that be looking really top notch? And then the last thing we've done that I think is worth sharing is we've freed up calendar space both before and after the retreat to really highlight this is the big thing going on. You know, within these couple weeks, we want everybody to come out on retreat. If you put together a really awesome and compelling, say, service project or day of service, but you schedule it the week before retreat, you probably are going to have students saying, you know what, I'm going to do the service project instead of retreat. If you just hold off and do that really compelling service project after the retreat, you probably will get the same kids to come, but they wouldn't have, you know, chosen that over retreat. So you can still do both, but really use your calendar space wisely so you're highlighting and communicating to the students, we want everybody to come on retreat. Okay, home stretch here. We have two rules in Catholic Terps that have helped us over the years just make some switches and do evaluations or ask that encounter with Christ question, and not be afraid of the answers we come up with. So the first thing is a rule called no sacred cows. So that means, with the exception of the sacraments, there's no one thing in our program where we have to say we must keep doing it this way. This can't be touched. It cannot be changed. It's always been, it always will be. So if someone on our staff is kind of defending or throwing out the line, we've always done it this way, we just gently say, laughingly, no sacred cows, to communicate to them, hey, like, think about maybe letting go of that. That's not a good enough reason to hang on to something. And then the second rule is a rule out is just as good as a rule in. So in campus ministry, probably in any job, right? We want everything, any new idea to be a rule in, right? We want to say like, yeah, that worked, let's do it again. But we can't be afraid of trying something out and it not working and saying, okay, well, we learned from that we're not going to do that again. So with our Mass time change 2 years ago and this 4-invite focus this fall, we went into it saying, if this fails miserably, we will know, don't do it again. Luckily, it didn't, and we are going to do it again, but we've certainly had ideas and events flop over the years, and we just said, okay, we learned from that. That's just not going to work for our campus or our population or for this time, and it's okay. So a rule out is just as good as a rule in. So I mentioned this resource, Living as Missionary Disciples, a little bit earlier, and so I just wanted to throw it up here on the slide so you could see it. If you go to the usccb.com, you can read it for free online on their website, but you can also click on the link and order it. I know some of your campuses have already read and applied this with your student leaders, and you guys are awesome. Our ADW, Archdiocese of Washington campus ministers, did a book club with Living as Missionary Disciples this past January. So maybe we're a little behind the ball, but we got to it then. And it is such an excellent resource that we're going to be using it or reading it with our student leaders over the summer. It's practical, it's mission focused, and basically it gives you permission from the bishops to get back to basics. It gives you the permission to really focus on the encounter with Christ. It gives you permission to stop doing 1,000 things and really focus on the most important things. So I really can't recommend it highly enough. I feel like it's one of the best things I've read in quite a few years, and I think it would be helpful for any ministry. Okay, so just the conclusion of my part here is actually a quote from Living as Missionary Disciples. It says, "The work of the new evangelization also invites the church as a whole to ever deeper renewal, a call to move from maintenance to mission." When I read this, I was so convicted of the ways in which I had fallen into maintenance mode in my approach to ministry, just kind of wanting to press repeat on everything because we had a good system going on, even though we had too much going on. And this really challenged me to be more mission focused. And we were more mission focused this year with this top 4 approach. And I think to be more focused on the mission of the church, the going out, the sharing the gospel, that really means we have to do the most effective things that bring about encounter with Christ and do those things excellently. So it doesn't mean like cancel your intramurals or stop having a Halloween party. Like those things can be effective in bringing people in, and they're certainly part of the process. However, I think our campus ministries will really flourish if the main emphasis is on these moments of encounter with Christ. And so this may mean your campus ministry really invests your time and your money and your resource in what you evaluate to be your top 4 or 5 things that lead to encounter with Christ. And I think those things might look a little different campus to campus. They may not be the exact 4 things we came up with. But to spend time really praying through and thinking about what that does look like. What are the things that bring about the most conversions on your campus? What are the things that lead others to Christ? And how can you invest in those things? So the result of that type of a focus for Catholic Terps has really been more people on fire for evangelization and less of our time focused on being event planners. So I just keep coming back to that maintenance to mission mode when I'm tempted to go back to over programming, and it helps me stay in line and stay focused on that encounter with Christ. So that's the end of kind of my formal part, and I'd love to just open it up for questions or comments. Maybe you've done a similar approach on your campus and you want to share about that with us, that's fine. But I'll hand it back to Deacon Frank and he will help with the questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Lisa. At this point, you can send me a text with the question in the text if you'd like, or just say open up my mic and I'll be happy to do so. So Lisa, while we're waiting,
Yes.
could you take a picture of your cup?
Oh man, I don't have my cup near me. You know what? When we send out the link, I can send some pictures.
That would be great. Thank you. All right.
Let me.
Do you have any questions? Yeah, the photo doesn't really have it clear.
Yeah, I don't think it's. I'm gonna go back to that.
Up there it was.
Yeah, you can't really see.
Too much red.
Even the cup was over-programmed because back in the day we had like 6 things on it. Now we have 3, and it looks better and it more clearly says, "Come to Sunday Mass, come to Wednesday night."
That's great. Okay, do we have any questions, folks?
A quiet crowd today.
Yeah, they're just typing. Okay, so here's our first question. It's from Christine. How do you think the process can work with a staff that is not unified?
Ooh. um, I would not even start the process, and I would focus on unifying your staff. So this is something I've become really passionate about lately, actually. Um, Father Rob, who's our chaplain I mentioned, has really led us from the very beginning to focus on relationships with the staff. And I have to admit that for the first couple years I was there, I was like, I don't get this. I would rather go home than have happy hour, even though happy hour is fun. Like, we've been here for 10 hours. I want to go home. But I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, it really clicked for me that that investment in the relationships is what helped the trust build over the years between our staff, so we could really see ourselves as on the same team. So that my advice would be, start investing some time into building relationships with your staff. We've done, as I said, happy hours over the year. We pray together 1 to 2 times a month. We do like 20 minutes of Lectio Divina and then time for sharing. That's been so fruitful, just to hear what's going on in each other's lives. We do a staff day together at the beginning of the semester. And there's no agenda for any of those things other than building relationships. So I would start there, because, yeah, I don't think it would work too well until you get everybody really trusting each other and seeing the benefit of the different parts of our program and the different roles that each of us might fulfill.
Okay, thank you. Christine, I've opened up your microphone if you have a follow-up to that, or... Okay. Any other questions?
Deacon Frank, I've got a question.
Go ahead, please, Mike.
Hi, Lisa. It's Mike. Thanks so much just for being on today. It's been really amazing. And here's a question is, did you have any kind of pushback from students as you decided to do fewer events?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great question. I was hoping someone would ask that. So we did. When we first rolled it out, I think especially our social committee was like, I don't know about this. And we said, just trust us. And they did. And here's the cool thing that happened with that. They realized that we do need to have a couple social events that the Catholic Student Center sponsors. Like, that's an important part of what we do, just that fun community building. But they took on more of their own initiative to just start these kind of smaller, more organic type events, but let everybody know about them. So use the listserv that we give them for everybody that checked, I want to be involved in social, to let people know. So there's actually more of that going on this semester. And it's working great, because I think it's working through people's kind of natural relationship networks. And Catholic Terps isn't hosting it, but the students are taking that initiative and kind of doing what they want and what they need. So there was a little bit of pushback, but they got on board. And now I think they're seeing, actually the social committee leader said to me last week, I get it. Like, this is so much better that we do these smaller things and just let everybody know about them. And we have the freedom to do that because the Catholic Terps calendar isn't overloaded with, things we have to be at.
Great. A couple questions have come up here, Lisa. Father Thomas, just to answer your question, is it being recorded? Yes, it is. And you will get a link from Krista if you registered for this. And she will get that out to you shortly, so you'll be able to utilize it. Jonathan has a question. He says, is there any collaborativity with other faith groups on campus, like crew, intervarsity, etc.? Yep. Do you see students weaving in and out of these groups? And then a follow-up, what sets Catholic Terps apart from the other groups?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do, first of all, we have great relationships between the staff of the different face on campus, whether it's crew and other Christian groups or, you know, Hillel. Frank, I don't know, there's a lot of background noise right now. Do you hear that?
Yep, stand by. I'm trying to mute it out. Not sure where it's coming from.
Okay, well, I'll just keep talking. So yeah, that's the first thing. We have good relationships between the staff. And then we also have great relationships between the students. So we have some students who are Catholic Terps, but maybe go to a crew prayer meeting once a week. And yeah, I think that type of popping in and out works well. What sets Catholic Terps apart, I think, is the Eucharist and the ability to have Mass and the sacrament. There's other things we share in common, like, you know, praise and worship you would find in our group, and other groups. Bible studies you would find in our group and other groups. But yeah, the Eucharist, I would say, is the thing that sets us apart.
Okay, I've got everybody muted, so I'm not sure where this is coming from.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Sorry about that. So let's see.
Stop.
Oh, that's back. Okay, let's see. So folks, please turn off background browsers. Yeah, but everybody's muted. So Christine's question, do only the focused missionaries lead the small groups?
So on our campus, if a Bible study is happening, that's going to be led through Focus. If there's a few other small groups that we have a men's discernment group, we have a couple of pornography accountability groups that my coworker oversees. So those groups are not led by Focus, but all of the Bible studies are.
Okay, thank you. Oh, that went away? Nope. All right. How do you go about determining who the Catholic students are on campus when they enter as freshmen?
Okay. That's an interesting question. So during Cup Outreach, I think we make contact with a lot of Catholic students. But ultimately, how we, I guess, get information is, yeah, Cup Outreach is pretty key. And then we do registration at our first weekend of Sunday Masses, as well as at our kickoff Wednesday dinner, which is a welcome barbecue. We do receive some information from the university, but that list has been dwindling. Some people who identify as Catholic, I guess, when they sign up, but that's actually not a huge way we find out. So I don't know, to answer your question more briefly, I guess we go out and let ourselves be known and then hope that the students come to us. And when they come to us, we collect contact info. Great.
The question was, do you worry about the Cup Outreach promoting drinking?
I guess not. We
Looks
just
like
say
a lemonade cup to me.
Everybody needs to drink. No, it's a great way. It's a cheap way to get our name out there. So what we hear is everybody uses it as their bathroom, like toothbrush, toothpaste cup.
Great. All right. We have openings here for questions. Anybody has a question, please send it either over in the text box in the chat window, or let me know that you'd like your microphone opened up. Or maybe I'll just go down and randomly open up microphones and let folks ask questions. Cody asks, how do you get non-small group leaders bought into a unified push at the start of the year? Small group push.
Yeah, I think it came down to casting a compelling vision. So as I said in answering Mike's question, we did get a little bit of pushback when we rolled this out, but we just asked our student leaders to get on board with it, and they did. You know, one thing we do, we plan our whole calendar before the semester starts. So even as we were laying out this vision that we were going to hold things off, each committee still was able to see, all of the things that they were going to be working on for the entire semester. So I don't know if that visual also maybe helped people see, okay, I'm still going to be having a place here. The other thing is we've really been working hard, and I think are going to work even harder next year to highlight that being the leader of a certain committee is obviously about that committee, but there's also a larger part of leadership that's about the whole. And so the whole meaning things like cup outreach or family weekend or, you know, our retreats where we're all coming together and it's not actually about a particular group or ministry, but it's about the whole. So I think casting that type of a vision can help student leadership not just be about, you know, I have my little empire of whatever the ministry is, but this actually much bigger part of, you know, the church on our campus.
Great. All right. Any other questions, please? All right. I'll just give it one moment up. Here we go. From Christine, do your student leaders help set up the calendar?
So my coworker Matt and I meet with the students at the end of each semester to find out what their ideas are for the upcoming semester. But then he and I are actually the ones who sit down and kind of assign dates and put some strategy to the ideas. So we do work together, but on the kind of practical, actual calendaring side, our staff does that because I think we have a better sense of how it all fits together.
Great. Questions are pouring in now. In a similar way, what do you do to keep your staff unified in this one vision? How often do you meet with staff? How do you pray together? How do you pray together? And when do you plan the calendar?
Okay. So that was a few questions. So you can just read back whatever I forget.
Sure. I'll start with the first. In a similar way, what do you do to keep your staff unified in this one vision? How often do you meet?
Okay. So we have a staff meeting every week that includes the campus ministers, the chaplain, development director, and the focus team director. So we are pretty in the loop about what's going on in each of the areas we're overseeing. We meet together, as I said, it probably winds up being twice a month for just relationship building time. So whether that's the staff prayer or we're grabbing a meal together or we're going off campus before the semester starts, those are some different options for that. In terms of praying together, our chaplain used to do a holy hour with the focus team. The focus team does a holy hour every day. But I think it was last year that we made the switch to having all of our staff, campus ministry and focus, come together and do the 20-minute Lectio Divina and then, 30 minutes of sharing what we got out of our prayer. And then we wrap it up by just sharing intentions. And that's been really effective. Just again, in terms of building relationships. The holy hour was a beautiful thing. Obviously, that's a great way to pray, but it didn't actually build relationships between the staff. So that's been the benefit of, I think, switching to the Lectio Divina.
And how often is that?
It's supposed to be twice a month, but sometimes it's once a month.
Okay. And how do you plan your calendar?
Okay.
And when do you plan? I'm sorry.
When? So we plan the calendar for the fall, probably in June. And then we plan the calendar for the spring, end of November, beginning of December.
And when and how long did it take for you to plan the new way of doing this in the midst of your ministry?
Well, it was a lot easier because we were doing less events. So that was actually helpful. But we started talking about this new way of doing things probably last June. And we were able to roll it out in August.
Great. And inquiring minds want to know, what does Terps stand for?
That is a very good question. So it's a terrapin. It's like a little turtle, or it's a type of turtle, and that's the school mascot. So back in the day, someone put a little halo on top of it, and that became our Catholic Terps logo.
Okay, Sue, you got your answer. Alan had a question. After shifting your strategies, how's your participation in your service outreach?
Yeah, so we saw participation increase pretty much across the board with this new approach. So our service program is mainly a bunch of small events throughout the year, but we have service. So after the retreat, we had probably 2 to 3 service events per month. And that's just strictly kind of direct service, but we also have pro-life and interfaith and multicultural, so all different aspects of social justice. So if you include that, we saw an increase in participation in all of those things, but not one of them drew like 100 people. It was more like 5 to 20 people, at these different projects throughout the semester, because they tend to only be able to have a smaller amount of people attend them.
And one of the things that came up very early on in your presentation, you said that your student body consisted of 2,800, but we wanted to clarify that.
It's 28,000.
Okay, very good. Yeah. Yep. Because you got a phenomenal response if it was only 2,800.
28,000. It's a pretty big school.
Yeah, it sure is. 3 times the size of ours. Okay, any other questions? Just give it one more moment. If anybody like me to open their microphone up, please just send me a text that says open up.
I also wanted to say, if anybody wants the actual PowerPoint of this, I'd be happy to email it to you. You can just email me, lisa@catholicterps.org. But I'd also be happy to chat one-on-one with anybody if they're interested. So you can email me for that as well.
Really appreciate that. And you do have a lot of extra time, as we know now. Okay, so let's see. Alice, I just want to make sure I've got the questions here in order. Yes, Alice asks, do you do service trips?
So we do. Our focus missionaries are actually on, 4 different spring break trips right now. Our chaplain is in El Salvador with one of them. We also have a Habitat for Humanity trip over the winter break, and we're looking into doing hopefully an international trip next December, which would be new territory for us. But again, in thinking about this encounter with Christ question, service trips, if I was to add a 5th thing, service trips are the most transformative thing. It's just that we're limited by the amount of students we can bring, which is why we're looking into seeing if we could run our own trip and bring a decent amount of students, to encounter Christ in the poor.
Let's see, Lisa, your question's her email address. It's right there on the screen, lisa@catholicterps, terps.org. All right, and is there any, and Matt, he gives it an exclamation point, go Lisa. So happy and proud to work with her. Do you want me to mute him or what?
Thanks, Matt.
And Cody says, if you and your staff have more time now, what do you choose to do with it?
Yep. So ironically, we're still very busy. It's not like we're twiddling our thumbs. However, we have had more time to invest in our student leaders, which has been really good for us to be able to better support them. I think back when we were in event planning mode, we were probably 70% of the time touching base with them because there was another event coming up, and 30% of the time actually investing in the ministry. But that's been able to switch drastically, where we can really minister to our leaders and better equip them. Personally, I work with our liturgy committee, and I've been able to just do a better job overseeing and supporting them in that actual ministry. And next year, we're kind of looking at revamping our social justice ministries again, so we can better support those students. So yeah, I think that's the big thing, just more available to actually do the ministry.
Great. We have a few more minutes here if anybody would like to send over another question before we let Lisa go. Okay, well, another question has not popped up. So, Elise, again, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, as soon as I started that. Josh says, have you noticed an increased number of RCIA candidates since the shift in ministry priorities, and are you reaching more non-Catholics?
Mm-hmm. RCIA is so interesting. I teach the class, and it's probably one of the favorite things that I get to do. I mean, this year we have 12 students. That tends to be our average, but one year we had 18 and one year we had 8. So I haven't really seen a direct correlation between really anything, any one model or the other, emphasis or the other in RCIA. What I see in RCIA is just God moving in people's hearts. Students being aware that it's him and following through and, kind of showing up at our doorstep. Yeah, more than I see kind of a direct ministry correlation. I see correlation between like what we do and retreat numbers or what we do and like small group attendance, but RCIA is something where mainly I just am amazed hearing how students wind up, wanting to explore the Catholic faith, and really it's, I think, the Holy Spirit at work in their life. So those are some thoughts on that.
And are you reaching more non-Catholics and or non-Christians?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I think we do have people who come by kind of just wondering and exploring, but I don't know that I could say like I've had more conversations with those types of people over the last year, as just there's a consistent amount kind of year to year.
Okay, well, unless another question comes up, Lisa, thank you very much. Mike, do you have anything you'd like to wrap up with? I know your microphone's not working well.
Just a big thank you. Thank you, Frank, for coordinating all the details, and thank you, Lisa, and your team. You guys are just very inspiring, and I'm extremely grateful.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure to put this together and share with everybody.
It's great. Thank you, Lisa. And don't forget the cup.
Yes. I'll send a picture of the cup to Krista.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us on the CCMA's webinar on Back to Basics, saying no to overprogramming. And we look forward to seeing all of you at our next scheduled webinar on April 23rd at 3 p.m. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you. And thanks again, Lisa.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.